Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Wanda Curley, your authority on project, program, and portfolio management. And this podcast is brought to you by PM Powered, your consulting company on project, program, and portfolio management. And it's interesting that I say that because my first topic today is how PPM, PMO, and PM can work together. And this is brought to you by Keyed In. And yes, it's a consulting company, and yes, they're hawking their goods, but it's a pretty good white paper, so I thought I'd bring you some of the things that they talk about in here. So what is, in their opinion, PMO? The most important responsibility of the PMO is to provide dedicated resources to ensure that project delivery teams are in complete alignment with the organization's strategic objectives. So what does a PMO really do? They make sure they oversee things in several key areas. All linkages and dependencies and enablers are there. Risk identification and tracking, resource allocation, utilization, not allocation, and communication. But what is a PMO not? So on the opposite side of the coin, let's look at what the PMO is not. The PMO is not a centralized bureaucracy that imposes overly onerous controls and procedures. How many times have you been around an organization where that's exactly what the PMO does? And I can assure you that PMOs that do that don't last very long. So PMO functions and business benefits. Some of the things that a PMO should do and do it well for an organization, especially if it's going to survive, is PM methodology, standards, implementation, and management, project policies, procedures and templates, implementation and management, project program monitoring and controlling, PM coaching and mentoring, and I think that's one of the most important things that a PMO can do, project program and initiation, governance process implementation and management, multi-project coordination, project program closing, and project performance monitoring and controlling, dashboards and scorecard implementation and management. So those are some of the things that they can do. But when we say PMO, what do we really mean? It can mean many things. It can be a program management office. It can be a project management office. It can be a portfolio management office. So you need to understand exactly what it is. So what does a PMO do? What benefits does it bring to the organization? And this is if we're talking about a PMO that can do any of these things. So whether it's a portfolio program or project management, the entire portfolio of projects will be managed with an eye toward future strategy. The PMO will help ensure that programs are delivered on time, within budget, and according to scope and across the organization. You will better understand the linkages and dependencies between various projects in the program portfolio, vastly improve communication within the program team and among all stakeholders. You will see an increase in the awareness and perception of value of your PMO in the executive suite and across the business unit. Let's see. There's major PMO models. So some of the things that they talk about here is a project repository. The PMO would be informational, project methodology, and standards. If it's a project coach, you would have all those three, plus you would have communication coordination, permanent structure, and supervisory responsibility. And then if you have an enterprise PMO, you would have all those 6 items, plus governance process, assess scope, allocate resources, verify time, budget, risk, and impact, and funding resources. So a project repository is usually in the line of business. A project coach PMO would be mostly an LOB. And then the enterprise PMO would be a full-blown PMO and within a line of business. So what are the functions and benefits of PPM? So PPM is project portfolio management. So that's assuming it's different than a portfolio management office. So the PPM can be described as the management of a collection of projects and programs in which a company invests to implement its strategy. So while PMOs can look at strategy of independent projects, PPMs do that as well, but they do it in a much more focused environment. PPM is not only about doing projects right, it's also about doing the right projects. So the PMO really doesn't do that. It just takes the projects that come into it. The PPM is actually selecting the right projects to do to meet the strategy. So what are identifying the right projects? One of the most important deliverables of PPM managers is to maximize the mix of projects to drive the highest possible corporate value. So they fill activities that have low reward but also demand little effort. These are worth doing only if you have project execution people on the bench. Then you have not worth it, projects that require lots of effort but produce little reward. So you don't want to do those in a PPM environment. And then major projects, these are the projects that require much effort but produce large rewards. Example of these types of projects include a product launch or implementing a major software application. And then you have quick wins. Our favorite types of projects, ones that require relatively low effort but still reap big rewards. An example of this type is launching an existing product into a parallel market. So defining your portfolio. Step one, gain early agreement on the scope of organizational coverage. So you have to decide on groups, units, and divisions, and departments, functional areas, and product and service types. Step two, understand the scope of work included within the portfolio. Is it just tactical projects, administrative projects, strategic, innovative, future vision? You've got to understand all of that. Step three, define the project categorization scheme. Is it mandatory, strategic, business support, experimental, infrastructure, maintenance, cross-organizational, and there's many others. Step four, define the portfolio key performance indicators. Net present value, product index, earned value analysis, IRR, internal rate of return, or cost-benefit analysis, or anything else that your company wants to do. But you have to define what the key performance indicators are going to be. PPM is a shift in thinking, and I've said that numerous times if you've seen any of my other podcasts. So what's new about PPM and how does it differ from traditional thinking on project delivery? PPM is spearheaded and influenced by executive and senior management sponsorship and responsibility. It straddles the gap between projects themselves, the management process, and the project team's accountability to the business. PPM is the bridge between strategic and operational. It changes the project-by-project oriented focus to planning and brings attention to the broader, more integrated approach. And I can't emphasize that enough. So how PMO, PPM work together? So you have portfolios, and that would be the PPM. Portfolios represent the collection of programs and projects. Program management is the process of managing multiple ongoing independent projects and distilling strategic goals into operational initiatives. And projects are a series of planned activities with defined starts and end points. So these are all the good things that we can bring, but let's look at different things about a PPM, a PMO, and we're calling a PMO a program management office, and project management. So the aspect of focus, PPM deliverables linked to strategic objectives, PMO, process to create deliverables, and project management are the deliverables. Scope, PPM selects, prioritizes, and optimizes entire project portfolios. PMO, multiple projects and interdependencies, and project management is a single project. Communication, it's across the business for a PPM. For PMO, it's among projects. And project management, it's within a project. And then finally, the organization, PPM, it's across the business. Organization for the PMO is just within the PMO, and the project management, it's just within the project team. So I think we've talked a little bit enough about project management, program PMOs and PPMs. So let's radically shift our focus now. You know, I talk about things from Singularity Hub, and this next one is, in the future, everyone might use quantum computers. So I thought this was kind of interesting because computers mean so much in the project management industry. So it'll be interesting to see where we are 50 years from now in quantum computers. So the article goes on to say that quantum computers are in its infancy. Quantum computation incorporates some of the most mind-bending concepts from the 20th century physics. In the US, Google, IBM, and NASA are experimenting in building the first quantum computers, but so is China. As we have come to find out, China is kind of on the forefront of many things that have to do in technology. So let's think about computers that we have today. The first modern computers were built in the 1950s, and look where we are today. We've got laptop computers, we've got tablets, we've got your phone that can act as a computer. And this is all in a matter of 60 years. Can you imagine where we will be with quantum computers in 60 years? So how did we get to where we were on computers today? Well, it started out with John Kemeny and Thomas Kurtz writing basic language. And basic language was so basic that kids and parents learned how to do it together. And I remember my son actually learning basic language. And so it then pushed us into understanding and computing more power, because as people saw what basic language can do, they kept on pushing it and pushing it. So let's enter into quantum computers here. So classic computing is the kind of computation that powers the computer in your home. It's based on how humans compute. It breaks down all computations into the most fundamental parts, and that's binary, digits 0 and 1. Nowadays, our computers use bits. So because they are easy to implement with switches that are either on the on or off position. In quantum computation, it's based on how the universe computes. It contains all of the classical computing, but incorporates a couple of new concepts that come from quantum physics. So in quantum physics, they don't use bits, they use qubits. And the outcome of quantum computation is exactly the same as with classical computers. It's a number of bits. The difference is that during the computation, the computer can manipulate qubits in more ways than it can with bits. It can put qubits in superpositions of states and entangle them. I know that's mind-boggling to me, and I don't truly understand that. But superpositions and entanglement are concepts from quantum mechanics that most people are not familiar with. Superposition roughly means that a qubit can be a mixture of both zeros and ones. Entanglement denotes that correlation between qubits. When one of a pair of entangled qubits is measured, that immediately shows what value you will get when you measure its partner. That is what Einstein referred to as spooky action at a distance. So what does quantum computing mean to you? Well, they're saying that quantum computers, when it starts and it gets out of its infancy and maybe more into the teenage states, it will be so powerful that it will be able to decode all encryption power that we have today. So quantum computing has important applications in cryptography, and they also think that it will have excellent uses in chemistry, because now there's certain reactions that classical computers can't have difficulty simulating, whereas quantum computers will be able to do it. So think of where we might be in 50 years. Today, IBM actually put a small quantum computer in the cloud, and it's allowing people to go out there and play with it. So if people are starting to play with quantum computing, can you imagine what will be in 10 years from now, 15 years from now? people won't be scared of it anymore, and they'll be able to push it to its limits. So it's almost like where we are with BASIC today. So stay tuned, because quantum computing is coming into your future. So let's get to something that I can wrap my head around a little bit better, and it's another thing from Singularity Hub, and it's called "Watch These Robots Do Tasks You Thought Were Simple, but for them are pretty hard." Unfortunately, you can't see the videos that I see, but there's a robot here that looks somewhat like an ostrich, granted a mechanical type ostrich, but this ostrich-looking robot is able to go from shelves. So think of a warehouse that has shelves with packages on it, and it's able to lift up the package, and it actually does it with suction. So it lifts up the package and takes it over to a staging area, and it stacks them properly. So, and this seems very basic to a human. You just go over, pick up the box, and take it over to another place and put it down, and you stack it properly. This robot actually has to turn around, pick up the thing, suck it up, and then turn it back around, and then take it over to a staging area and mount it properly so it's not stacked all over the place. And it actually does it fairly well, and it does it fairly quickly. And it also showed a similar type thing, putting the same type of packages on a conveyor belt. So it was the same robot doing the same thing, so actually doing it in for different things. So one was stacking and one was putting it on a conveyor belt. And if they could actually make it do it in a quicker fashion and be able to stack in a way based on the address of the box, it'll be even more practical, because right now they were just showing that it could do it. It wasn't showing that it had any other type of computing within the robot, but I'm sure that's coming. The next robot that they showed was one that could take things out of a basket and or take things, it was disparate things, and if it was able to discern which type of thing it wanted to take and then throw it into another basket. Can you imagine if you're trying to sort things that all come into this box to you, this robot can now sort it into different baskets for you. So that would be wonderful for certain types of industries. And then the third one was really intriguing to me. It looked like a hand, and this hand had a cube in it, and it had letters, on it. And what the person was telling it to do, in binary terms, of course, was, okay, now select the N. So it would manipulate this cube until the N was on top and it was in the right rotation. Then it would tell it to do an A. It would rotate that cube around until the A was at the top in the right rotation, and etc. And it kept on doing it and doing it. So can you imagine if you could take this hand, and it could do blood pressures? It can now take a pulse. So can you imagine in the healthcare industry what this hand could do? And even in different manufacturing environments, it would be interesting to see if this hand could then maybe put labels on packages and things of that sort. So again, we're able to mechanize and robotize things that humans do today. And yes, it'll be taking away jobs from humans, but remember, when robots take things away, we end up having more jobs. It's just in a different industry. So what's my final thing today? Since we're kind of talking about technology, my final one today is 5 big breakthroughs in 3D printing. I remember when I was at HP, 3D printing was just in its infancy, and now it's really going gangbusters. I was surprised to see where 3D computing was at today. So 3D printing translates digital files into three-dimensional objects by layering materials in a process known as additive manufacturing. So there's over 250 materials today that 3D printers can produce functional parts and full-color objects. And these different materials include metals, plastics, ceramics, glass, rubber, leather, stem cells. Can you imagine stem cells? And even chocolate. It's 100 times faster than it was when it first started out. It's 100 times faster than traditional 3D printers. It's building on a bed of photoreactive liquid resin. The application of different light wavelengths has been found to selectively harden the resin as it's released, and thereby achieve a continuous print. So there's not incremental layering anymore. 90% material efficient. Beyond rapid and high-resolution production, additive manufacturing poses extraordinary second-order implications. So there'll be 90% efficiency of the material, so that's just a 10% waste in material. 3D printing further unlocks opportunities for mass customization, democratized production, and systemic perfection. So what are the 5 breakthroughs that they expect from 2019 through 2024? 3D speeds are slated to increase by 50 to 100 times. So just think of where it is today. So based on what it is today, it'll be 50 to 100 times greater by 2024, if not even better. So in a new feat, however, the MIT Laboratory for Manufacturing Productivity recently created a printer 10 times faster than traditional desktop models and 3 times faster than the $100,000 industrial scale ones. So achieving record speeds, the MIT team printed a helical bevel gear in a mere 10 minutes and a pair of eyeglasses. Can you believe eyeglasses in 3.6 minutes? Can you imagine going into your lens crafter and taking in your prescriptions and you have any type of eyeglasses you want in 3.6 minutes? That'll revolutionize the industry. Right now, if you go into Lens Crafter, it takes anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to get your glasses. And then you have to select from the ones you want. Can you imagine saying, I want it in purple, or I want it in red, or I want it in pink, and they can do it for you. Sustainable, affordable 3D printed neighborhoods are launching. So the construction and real estate industries will experience disruption at monumental scales. Right now, they can build a house for $6,000. Can you believe that? So the futuristic building wastes less cement, cutting costs and resources. In the future, home printers will incorporate infrastructures, including drainage pipes, and even eventually smart sensors, rendering a fully integrated living experience. And more recently, a startup called New Story was able to build 100 homes in 8 months for about $6,000 each. Can you imagine that? Okay, the third item is convincing and delicious 3D printed steaks and burgers in fine restaurants on Earth and in space. Can you imagine that? 3D printed steaks and burgers. So 3D printed meat using plant-based proteins will provide a more sustainable solution to feeding the world's growing population. Livestock produces 14.5 to 18% of global human-induced greenhouse gas emissions. Yet 3D printed meat can provide the same satisfaction of meat consumption without harmful environmental effects. I hope that means that cows aren't going away, but we shall see. The problem that they're having right now is that the texture of it is not very good. So there is an Israeli company that's actually working on lowering the cost and fixing the texture of the meats. 4, metal 3D printers will overtake plastics. Prepare for the emergence of 3D printed jewelry, car and airplane parts, kitchenware and prototypes. 3D metal printers will not only eliminate waste in manufacturing, but also create more lightweight parts. Can you believe that? That will be great. Finally, what we will be doing is saying, hey, will be the most frequently used command in design engineering. So it'll just be your Alexa, your Siri, your Google. In fact, they may even be run by it. Can you imagine? We might even have 3D printers in your home, just like we have copy printers and fax machines. It'll now be a 3D copy printer or fax machine. So you'll say, hey, Cogni, design me a new pair of shoes, 8.5 medium with load bearing for my weight is a phrase that we'll be using in the next 5 years. So can you imagine? We'll be talking to our 3D printers. So maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll have a 3D printer in your house. So with all these great thoughts, I'm Wanda Curley, your authority on project, program, and portfolio management. This has been brought to you by PM Powered, your consulting company on project, portfolio, and program management. If you are a project manager on any of these items that I've talked about today, please contact me at wanda@pmpowered.com. I'd love to have you on my podcast so that we can have a discussion about the projects that you're on. Remember to follow me on PM Current. You can follow me on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and I can't remember the fourth one. But anyway, follow me on those items, and you can see my various podcasts. Again, if you have anything that you'd like to talk to me about that has to do in the project, program, and portfolio management area, please contact me at wanda@pmpowered.com. You have a blessed week, and I'll see you next Monday.